Okay.
Cool.
Well, we can go ahead and get started. It is 12 o'clock. Well, Philip, meet Mike, digitally meet. Obviously, it would be nicer to meet in person, but also, Mike, what time is it for you? You're in Victoria?
It's 9 a.m. right now.
9 a.m., nice and early. Perfect way to start the day.
Yeah, not bad. I've had my coffee, so we're good.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I mean, it's 12:01. I thought I would maybe give people about 5 more minutes to join in here. But of course, this is also being recorded. So for people who aren't able to join us live today, they can tune in later and watch it live as well. I'm just going to set up one more thing here and then we'll get started. I'm just going to make sure that it's live on Facebook for us. Okay, we're going to do this. It is so nice out here. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to go outside eventually. Oh,
what's the weather like in Ottawa right now?
It's gorgeous. We had a really nice long weekend. It was sunny and warm. It was really, really nice. So it got me excited to start my outdoor garden. Okay, that worked. Whatever you just did, it worked.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Okay.
I would say so. If you were, I know the last time you got a free.
Okay, so let's go ahead and just get started here.
Okay.
Welcome to anyone who's tuning in right now. And welcome, of course, to our panelists, Mike and Philip. Mike is, of course, from Reefertilizer and Philip from Teragenic Solutions. My name is Emma. I'm from the Urban Botanist. And I'm going to essentially be hosting the event today, which is called Grow Good Weed. We came up with this concept a couple months ago. It's kind of been in the back of my head for the last few years, I'd say, just with the number of inquiries that I've had coming in of people asking like, oh, like, you know a lot about growing indoor tropical plants, but how about cannabis? And I didn't have too many answers. So I thought that would be a really great workshop and a great way to connect with some local experts and bring that knowledge to our audience, to our followers, and to everyone who is interested in learning more about growing good weed. So a little bit about the Urban Botanist, which is my company, of course. I started about 3 years ago with the idea of encouraging people to engage with nature and botany in an urban setting. So I find a lot of the times nowadays people feel starved for that interaction with nature. So I came up with the idea of bringing interactive workshops and events for people to learn more about plants, learn more about nature, and, you know, get crafty and fun with it at the same time. And it's essentially evolved into all sorts of different awesome things, such as this Grow Good Weed workshop, which I'm so excited about. I really hope for this to be an interactive workshop. So please, if there are any attendees, you have a question at any time, feel free to either type it in the chat. That's a great question, Rod. Either type it in the chat or you can type it in the Q&A section. At the end of the workshop, we will be doing a Q&A as well. So you can either save your questions for then, or if right in the moment you have a question, go for it. I'll pose it to the group, okay? So I'm just going to share my screen here really quickly. Here is just kind of a layout of what to expect for the workshop. I'm going to do my quick little introduction here. We're going to hear first from Mike Druin from Reefertilizer. Then we're going to segue into Philip from Teragenic Solutions. And then we'll leave a chunk for some Q&A, some final remarks, and that will be wrapped up. So you can expect to listen to us chat, or if you're tuning in and watching us live, you can expect this to run for about an hour and 20 minutes. We'll see how it goes. We do want it to be, like I said, an interactive workshop. There's going to be some polling questions that I'll ask throughout the event. The answers are completely anonymous, so they're also not necessary if you don't feel like answering them, no need. It's more to give us a better idea of how to bring you better information and how to best kind of form our future workshops, which we're looking at doing more of as well. So this is what you can expect from our workshop today. So of course we were planning on doing this live and in person, our Grow Good Weed workshop, but life is very different now. So we are still really excited about it. We've kind of changed our event into being able to offer our kits, the Grow Good Weed starter kits, which have the trio packs from Reefertilizer. There's bottled nutrients from Teragenic Solutions. There's lots of groovy fun stuff in them. There's some Bovita packs that are for hydrating or managing the humidity inside of your cannabis. I use them in my big jar here. And what they do essentially is, if you're my big, massive jar that's the size of my head, this is what I grew from last year. Last year I kind of had a little experiment where I grew a couple plants. It was just like, oh, it's science, like let's give it a go. And for someone who knows absolutely nothing about growing cannabis, I know lots about growing regular plants, indoor, outdoor, but when it comes to cannabis, I think that it can kind of be a little bit intimidating for some people, like, you know, looking at the fertilizers, the blooming stage, the veg stage, it can kind of become overwhelming. But I think breaking it down and bringing it back to basics of understanding how these plants grow and what their basic necessities are is really what we're trying to highlight with this Grow Good Weed workshop. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to first off hear from Mike Druin from Reefertilizer. Him and his brother Joey are co-owners. Joey is Ottawa based. Mike is based in Victoria, British Columbia. And Mike has over 10 years experience, more on the recreational side, small and micro grows, that sort of thing. And he's also really passionate about demystifying growing cannabis and what that really means. So we're going to hear from Mike first. And like I said, if you have any questions along the way, feel free to type them either into the Q&A or chat, and I will interrupt Mike and bring them forward. So Mike, feel free to take it away.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. Let me share my screen here, show a couple of my slideshow. So I'm Mike Drouin, and I'm one of the co-founders of Reefertilizer, me and my brother. And what Reefertilizer is a growing system to make it easy for people to grow cannabis at home. So like Emma said, I've been growing cannabis for over 10 years, helping friends grow thousands of plants in total. But one of the first things that happened to me when I first started growing cannabis was I was really intimidated when I walked into the hydroponics stores for the first time looking at nutrients, because you'd see a big shelf and there'd be 60, 100 different products that I was so confused as to what each one of them was and how you use them with cannabis. And so over the last 5 years, I tried to really figure out what it is, what are the nutrients that cannabis actually needs? Because it made no sense to me when I would go to a Home Hardware or Canadian Tire and there's only one box of tomato fertilizer. There's not a whole bunch of different types. So there has to be a better way to deal with nutrients when it came to cannabis. And so when my brother wanted to start this company, Reefertilizer, that was one of our main focuses, was to try to create a cannabis growing system that was versatile and that would be partnered with a whole bunch of education to kind of help teach people how to grow cannabis from seed to flower. And so what our nutrients, what we're trying to do was we wanted stuff that a beginner could use and an advanced grower could use, that you could use with hydroponics or with cocoa mediums or just growing in soil, growing different strains, including auto-flowering strains. We just wanted something that could kind of hit all the basic elements and the basic nutrients that cannabis plants need. So we decided that the best way to do this was to design products that would be for each phase of growth. And so we ended up creating 3 products: Start, Grow, and Bloom. Start for the first phase of growth, which we consider the germination phase. So really early on, the sprouts and a seedling phase. We have Reefertilizer Start, which is used as a soil conditioner that helps create a living soil and to give like a really good place for the roots to start, because the roots are really the backbone of your plant. And if you can have a really healthy environment to grow in, then your plant is going to be loving it for its entire lifespan. Grow and Bloom are both blended fertilizers that are designed specifically for cannabis plants. Grow is designed for the vegetative phase of growing, and Bloom is designed for the flowering phase, focusing mostly on flower production, THC production, terpenes, and those chemical processes within the plant. I'm going to talk about these in a moment. I just wanted to show a couple of the things that we worked on with a few of our customers. This is a customer down in Southern Ontario, I believe. First time they ever grew cannabis before, some really big plants. I think they got some 10-gallon, 12-gallon planters here. But this was their first time growing cannabis. They used Reefertilizer, and we basically helped guide them the entire summer on just like how to deal with little problems with their cannabis plants. While this person here on the right, they've been growing cannabis for longer than I have. And the reason they like Reefertilizer was because our nutrients try to hit all those base elemental requirements of cannabis plants. He can use it in conjunction with other fertilizers. So if he's growing some strange strains that require a little extra other things, he saves a lot of money because he doesn't have to use as much of those additional nutrients, because he has all those base level nutrients already supplied using Reefertilizer Grow and Bloom. So let me go through each one of our products and explain kind of what it does. Reefertilizer Start, like I said before, it's a soil conditioner with mycorrhizae. Basically, what Reefertilizer Start does is it helps create a healthy ecosystem in your soil. So when you're growing in soil, soil is built up full of inorganic and organic material, and it's full of like bacteria and microorganisms that are all interacting with each other. And this interaction kind of helps roots of plants better take in nutrients from the area around it. And one of the microorganisms that we include in Reefertilizer Start is something that's called mycorrhizae. Now, mycorrhizae you might have seen before in some potting mixes and stuff. But mycorrhizae is a really, really interesting fungus that's used in all sorts of agriculture. And what this fungus does is it grows symbiotically with root systems.
Okay.
And so the fungus will grow along a root, and then it will extend these tiny little white hairs further into the soil, which increases the ability for the root to take on nutrients and take on water. At the same time, it also protects the root systems from drying out, and it also protects the root systems from getting any kind of infection. And because this is such a helpful thing for the plant in return will give the mycorrhizae fungus starches and sugars to help it grow. And this relationship just goes gangbusters. And by helping the roots grow, the mycorrhizae has a better chance of growing, and it just will fill up your pot with this cool fungus and roots.
That's really interesting. I think what a lot of people might think when they first hear or read the word fungi, they're like, I don't want anything to do with that. I don't want that in my garden. I don't want that in my soil. But going back to that symbiotic relationship, and just to kind of break down what that means, when two organisms are living symbiotically, it means that they're both helping each other towards success. It's the opposite of being parasitic, and that one is kind of pulling away from the other. But I think that that's so interesting in how they kind of live together in symbiosis. That's really interesting. And how it just essentially, it increases the surface area of the roots, right?
Exactly, yeah. It increases their ability to take on more nutrients, right? So instead of just like one root hair going out, now there's thousands of little tiny ones that will
That's
draw
so
in even more
important.
stuff. Yeah.
It all starts with the roots. I mean, with house plants as well, with all plants, when the roots aren't healthy, the plant's not healthy. So you really have to focus on those healthy root systems. So that's interesting to know.
Yeah, it's very important to have a really good soil, especially if you're growing in soil. It's really important to also think about that ecosystem that's going on underneath the ground. So there's three ways that you can use Refertilizer Start to make sure that your roots are getting this mycorrhizae on them. The first way we recommend is to make a seedling mix, which is basically 2 parts potting soil to 1 part Refertilizer Start. And this is what you use put your germinated seeds in or your cuttings into. And like the tap roots that emerge will be inoculated with this mycorrhizae. And so if you already have that culture in there, it will grow and expand with the plant. Another way that you can use Refertilizer Start is before transplanting, which is really helpful if you've started your plants in those little peat pucks or Jiffy Cubes or whatever.
Okay, yeah.
And so what you would do is before you transplanted your plants outdoors, you would put a couple scoops, 4 scoops into the bottom of the hole, and then you would do your transplant on top of that. And that would allow the mycorrhizae to be right there in the root zone. And it would inoculate your roots from there on and spread out throughout the planter. Another way you can use Refertilizer Start, this is great if you don't like transplanting your plants. A lot of people who grow autoflower in cannabis don't like to transplant. They like to start their plants from seed or from a clone or something in one big pot. And so they don't really have the chance to add mycorrhizae like directly to the root zone necessarily. So what we recommend for those people is to use Refertilizer Start as a top dressing. So basically you would sprinkle about 4 scoops around the base of your plant, water it, and this would allow the spores to slowly get into your soil, and it would also introduce the other microorganisms within Start to your soil, so you have more of a diverse ecosystem within that soil, which is a
And
very
it's so
good
easy
thing
to
for your
use
plants.
too.
Yeah, you just simply have to add it, and that's pretty much it. No mixing in water. It's not really recommended. Well, you can't really use this for hydroponic grows. It's mainly for soil. Some people have used it with Coco and some of those Soilless mixes, and it will work fine because it will still add the mycorrhizae to it.
Okay.
Yeah, and so like transplanting is usually the point when the plant has about 3 to 5 sets of leaves. And after you've transplanted it outdoors or inside a bigger pot inside, that's when you would start feeding your plants normally. So I usually start feeding my plants when they have 3 to 5 sets of leaves right after transplant. And this is when you would start using Refertilizer Grow. And what Refertilizer Grow is all about is it's basically a synthetic fertilizer blend that has high levels of nitrogen. Nitrogen is really important for building chlorophyll. And so the more chlorophyll your plant has, the more it can photosynthesize and the faster it will grow. So using a high nitrogen fertilizer at this phase is really important to get that initial structure of your plant and to let it grow really, really quickly. It also contains about 8 other elements that are really beneficial for cannabis plants during this phase. So yeah, the veg period lasts about 3 to 4 weeks on average. And each week you'd slowly bring up the dosage of Refertilizer Grow that you would give it. So as you can see here, we got a little feeding schedule, 5 mils of Refertilizer Grow mixed into 4 liters of water, going up to 10, going up to 15 over weeks 2 and 3. Very easy to mix. It's just a powder. So what we recommend is people would take a scoop, mix it with a little bit of water so it's fully dissolved, and then add more water, like the rest of their 4 liters, and then you just feed your plants. I know some people who grow outdoors, they run into a problem where their planters might dry out in between feedings, which is pretty normal. In those cases, you would just water your plants like normal in between. I've had a few other people that switch it up a little bit differently. So instead of giving them water like on Wednesday and feeding them on Sunday, they'll actually give them a lighter dose, like half a dose of Refertilizer on the Wednesday and half a dose on Sunday. So whatever way you feel is the best way to do it. is how you can do it. It's very versatile in that sense. You don't have to be stuck to the schedule necessarily. So yeah, veg lasts for about 3 to 4 weeks. And then that's when you would switch from using Refertilizer Grow for veg to Refertilizer Bloom. Refertilizer Bloom is, again, specifically crafted for cannabis plants and provides higher levels of phosphorus and potassium, as well as calcium and magnesium, which are really important for the chemical processes that build flowers and terpenes and THCA and all the good stuff that we all know and love in cannabis plants. Very simple to use, just like Refertilizer Grow. You mix a little bit in with some water, shake it up, and feed your plants once a week. The schedule is very straightforward. The first week is just 5 mils mixed into 4 liters of water, and you slowly bring it up to 10 mils for every week after that. And you basically max it out at 10 mils all the way up until maybe a week before harvest, where you can have the option of flushing your plants if you wanted to. Flushing is just the idea of giving your plants a whole bunch of water right before you're harvesting to help try to draw out nutrients that are in the plants. There's a lot of discussion on whether or not flushing is super important or not. From my experience, it doesn't really affect the flavor that much. A lot of people will say that flushing will make your plants taste better. I find that you're going to get most of that flavor, and most of the changes in flavor are all going to occur during the drying and the curing process, in my opinion. But for some people, they prefer to flush their plants right before harvest. And basically, yeah, that's how Refertilizer brings you all the way from seed to flower with just 3 products. I have a couple of slides here. We have like a nice little infographic here on the left. This is available on our website, and it tells you like the perfect environment for each phase of growth. So the right temperature, the right humidity, and how long your light should be on for. So I'll just go through a little different stages and quickly tell a few tips I've noticed for a lot of beginners where they might fall short sometimes.
And is this specific to indoor growing here with the lights? Because of course you have control over it, but is this specific at all to indoor or outdoor, or can this be applied to both?
Well, this would be the optimum environment for growing cannabis. So obviously outdoors, you can't control that.
Right.
So you won't be able to control the humidity, and you won't be able to control the amount of light. So light is one thing you don't have to worry about when you're growing your plants outdoors. They'll naturally switch over to flower or whatever.
The sun rises and sets on its own. So it's one less thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's kind of interesting too, because the color of the sun actually kind of changes, or the amount of the different colors of the sun change over the seasons. So like in the fall, you have a lot more red light coming from the sun because the sun's usually lower on the horizon. And in the summertime, you have a lot more blue light. So when you're growing indoors, if you're using LEDs and stuff, blue light is really good during the veg phase, whereas in the flowering phase, a lot more red light is used by the plant.
I think that's so interesting, because basically you're trying to, when you're growing indoors, you're of course trying to mimic Mother Nature in a lot of ways, right? Like you're really trying to make that plant believe that they're growing outside, but you have so much more control over those variables that would affect it negatively or positively. So I think that's so interesting. We do have a question here from Rod. How long from seed to harvest? What is typical?
It really depends on the strain that you're growing. So like a sativa strain might take 6 months to go from seed to harvest, because some sativas just take a really long time to flower. Auto flowering plants will take about 3 months. They take a very short amount of time because they have maybe about 3 weeks of veg, and then they're going into flower right away. So on average, if you're growing photoperiod plants, it will take about 4 months, I'd say, to grow from seed to flower usually.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
For seedlings, like if you're going to grow outdoors, I always recommend starting your seedlings inside first, because it gives them a chance to grow a little bit and get a little bit more robust, that they'll be able to like help fight off like infection and stuff. Mm-hmm. Another thing too is if you're growing from seeds, seeds are very expensive. And I don't know about you, but I've actually eaten cannabis seedlings before, and they're delicious. And if I
Oh,
think they're delicious, deer and animals think they're delicious. So
uh,
don't waste your money by putting your seedlings outside. Start them inside at first.
yeah,
Um,
sure.
it's a very good idea. And it's a nice idea to also maybe invest in a little small LED grow light to kind of give those seedlings a lot of light. Because a lot of the time, if you're just putting your seedlings in a windowsill, they'll grow really, really tall and stretch. And as soon as they start developing leaves, they'll like fall under the weight of that.
That's kind of what mine looks like right now, I think. It's kind of just tall and
Oh yeah, it's tall. Yeah, it's not too bad though. I've had some that
nice,
are
sweet little
way too
seedling.
long.
But that's a good point in investing in an LED light. I know that Teragenic Solutions has so many different indoor light options. I got one on Amazon. I don't know if it's strong enough. I have it for my other plants. But yeah, I think to kind of help to kind of manage the growth of your seedling and of your plant long term. At least when I grew these little guys last year in my house, I think I got them to the point where they maybe had like 6 set of leaves where they become quite fragrant, and I let it grow inside until basically it was too fragrant for it to be inside.
Yeah.
And I brought it out. So yeah, that's good to know.
Another thing I recommend for newbies is to keep a journal. A grow journal is a really handy thing to have on hand. A really handy thing to have on hand. That sounds funny.
I love that.
Just to keep track of your experiments or like the different strains you're growing and how they reacted to the nutrients that you gave them, because you can learn a lot from that. And if you're asking for help, it's a really helpful tool for someone like me to kind of see where you're at with your plants and like what's going on and to kind of figure out what the problem could be. So
Okay.
keeping a journal is a very good thing to have. Veg phase, one thing I always tell people is to have fun with training. So training is an interesting idea with cannabis plants, and it's just by slowly and gently bending your plants or manipulating your plants in a certain way that they grow in very specific directions. This is a great way to get more light into like the middle of your plant so that it's better making use of sunlight and photosynthesis. Letting your soil dry out before waterings is also really nice because I don't know what it is about cannabis plants, but they really, really like it when the soil kind of dries out and then they get fed. If the soil is a little too wet, they don't really react as well. Monitoring your pH is another important thing. Usually tap water and refertilizer will be fine, but some tap waters have really wacky pHs. And it's good to kind of like be aware of this, because when I was talking before about that ecosystem in the soil, you want to have a pH between 5.5 and 6.5, and that allows those chemical processes to happen inside the soil.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're giving it really wacky pH water from your tap, it can kind of negate all those good things that are happening in your soil. So it's something to watch out for.
Okay. I have a question here. I
Yeah.
mean, it was kind of already answered, but maybe you can both go into a little bit more detail here. Is there a disadvantage if I water my plants every day when it comes to losing nutrients? I have a raised garden bed for my plants. So they're wondering, is there a disadvantage to watering your plants every day? You did just mention to kind of let the soil dry out a bit between waterings, but maybe you can just elaborate a little bit on that.
Well, the thing is roots, they like water, but they also need oxygen too. And so that's one thing we kind of don't think about. So if you're always watering your plants every day and that or that soil is always saturated, then the roots don't have the ability to breathe and they kind of drown. And there's a possibility of getting like root rot.
That's
So
right.
I don't really recommend watering every day unless the soil is drying out every day. If
Okay.
it's drying out every day, then yeah, totally. But you
Really,
don't
what
want to be
I get that
overwatering.
question all the time with watering, and I find that probably the number one like plant fatality cause is overwatering. You know, people get their plants, they're like, I'm going to be the best plant mom ever, the best plant dad ever. I'm going to water it every single day. no, you don't want to do that, right?
Yeah.
I also kind of like to say that your plant should be getting as much water, like the correlation should be water to sunlight and match. If your plant isn't getting too much sunlight, of course, it's not photosynthesizing as often, doesn't need as much energy. The soil's not drying out as quickly either. So you kind of got to keep those things in mind. One of my little tricks is I'll do the 2-knuckle rule, where I'll stick my finger into the soil up to 2 knuckles. If it feels dry, I'll give it a watering. If it still feels a little bit moist, I'll hold off a bit.
Yeah. I always recommend that. Like if the top 2 inches are dry, then it's time to water your plant. If not, just let it wait for a day. It's not going to kill the plant or anything, but it kind of likes that.
Perfect. Yeah. Kind of like those helicopter parents, but helicopter plant parents that are like, I'm going to water every day, and you end up killing your plants that way. So it's definitely a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Oh, I have another question.
Sorry. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay, the question is for outdoor. Is there any particular pests we should be worried about? You know what, Rod, we're going to get to that. Absolutely. I know that Philip for sure has a lot of different experience with outdoor pests, but absolutely we're going to get to that. I experienced it myself last year. I just grew a couple plants outside, and I had no idea what to expect. Of course, outdoors, you have no control over pests as I do inside, where I'm looking over my plants every day. I'm like, oh, there's spider mites here, I can eradicate that. Oh, I see some mealybugs here, I can deal with that. You don't have that kind of control when you're growing outdoors, right? So you can see everything from mites to aphids, like so many different pests can be seen on your plants outside. And I got to the point where I didn't know how to harvest, because I'm cutting my flower and I'm like, okay, well, this is great and all, but there's so many bugs on this, and I'm not sure if that's a good thing. So I think we will get into that, and I will make a point to go into more detail on the pests shortly. Okay, Rod? So please feel free to continue, Mike.
I wanted to give a little PSA. So people who don't know, there's a difference between female cannabis plants and male cannabis plants. Female cannabis plants produce the flowers and the buds that we all know and love, while male plants produce pollen. And if you're growing outdoors and you don't know if your plants are male or female or anything, at flower, if you notice that your plants are males, please get rid of them, because there could be people in your neighborhood that are also growing cannabis plants. And if they have a female plant and any of the pollen from your male plant gets to it, it can pollinate their plant and it will start producing seeds and less potent flowers. So of course you can't watch all your neighbors, but if you can be the good neighbor and get rid of all your male plants, if you can, then get rid of them as soon as possible, because you're going to ruin your neighbor's day when they find all these seeds in their bud.
Yeah, I'm just going to open up my back door and make this PSA to my neighbors too, because I was worried about that last year. I've heard of that happening where people had beautiful female plants growing, and then next day they've been pollinated by a neighboring male that's, someone didn't get to getting rid of. I mean, I've been there. I had a male plant one time and was like, oh, I feel so bad ripping this out, and but
yeah, I always feel bad having to kill a male plant. The male plants can be reused. Like apparently there's some medical value to the roots, and you can create balms and stuff using male plant roots. I don't know too much about that, but
interesting. I'll look into it.
I always try to find a way to not waste it. I guess you can always compost the plant too, which is helpful.
Exactly, which is what I ended up doing and what I would do for most things. But yeah, that's the best way to go about it, is to at the very least compost it. But you need to make sure that pollen is staying as far away from your female plants as possible.
Because that stuff goes for miles.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah. For other things with flowering plants is when they're nearing their end of life, they're going to change color. And so I've had a lot of people freak out near the end of flower because they'll see like their leaves are turning yellow or their buds are turning purple, and they're like, what's going on? My plant's going all these crazy changes, which is a totally natural occurrence. As like the cannabis plant reaches its maturity and its end of life, it starts cannibalizing itself a little bit. And instead of caring about keeping those leaves on the plant, it will more focus on keeping the buds going and maturing those buds and making them smell really good, because that is like the method for the plant to communicate that it's ready to like pollinate.
To attract those
To
pollinators,
attract,
right?
that's exactly it. Yeah. It's also, it's a defensive mechanism too. Like as the plant is like hit, and like by bending it or hurting a plant in a lot of ways, it will actually increase terpene production, because the plant will react to this like stimuli and be like, something's attacking me. I need to pollinate faster.
Okay.
So there's some really weird methods that people do to like punish their plants in flower to try to up that terpene production. I don't know how many of them are like bro science or real science, but there's some interesting techniques like taking a spike and sticking it through the stem of your plant. Is one method that the Dutch use.
Really?
Yeah, it's supposed to like lock off nutrients so the plant's not pulling in more nutrients from the soil. And I guess in some ways it stresses the plant too, but I'm not too sure about the scientific background behind these experiments, but
The
it's
bro
always fun to
science versus
experiment.
the real science. Yeah, that bro science
Yeah,
makes you sometimes.
because a lot of it is very like people saying that, oh, it tastes better, but taste is a matter of opinion a lot of the time. So
Sure. Yeah, it's hard to measure for sure. Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
So yeah, these little infographics that we made, you can find them at our website at Reefertilizer.ca. Oh yeah, here are some cool pictures I wanted to share with you guys to get you a little excited. These are some interesting projects some people have done on Instagram. So this guy makes bonsai trees out of
That
cannabis
is so
plants.
cool.
Yeah. So cannabis plants, it's really easy to train a cannabis plant and bend it and grow it in all sorts of weird ways. There's another person I know that trains their cannabis plants, and they'll actually make them spiral and hold a little crystal orb in the middle, and they have it as like a display. It's really neat.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
And then this guy over here grows plants in 1 ounce shot glasses. So he's probably watering them maybe 2 or 3 times a day. But it just goes to show like cannabis is a weed. It's really not that hard to grow. It just needs very specific things to continue to grow. And then here, this one here in the middle is a cool example of what's called a training technique called mainlining. So the plant is like clipped. And so when it gets clipped, it will grow 2 main branches off the center. And then they will use little ties to bring down the branches. And this causes the whole plant to grow more horizontally instead of straight up like a Christmas tree. And so you'll be able to get like a better use of sunlight, and you'll actually get larger nodes like these guys, larger colas on each individual one of these bud sites.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so cool. I love the bonsai tree one, obviously. We did a bonsai tree workshop not too long ago, but I learned in that workshop, you can essentially make any woody stemmed plant out of bonsai tree. Like,
Yeah.
what people don't realize is it's not a particular seed, it's not a particular strain of cannabis. Anything can be grown into a bonsai.
Yeah, it's really neat.
That is so cool. Like I need that now.
So yeah. Like I was saying before, you can find those infographics that we had for each phase at Reefertilizer.ca. I believe some people had already gotten our guide to cannabis cultivation when they ordered the Grow Good Weed kit.
Mm-hmm.
But if they need another copy of that, they can visit Reefertilizer.ca and sign up for the newsletter. We'll get a copy of that, and they'll get a monthly email with our latest articles and tips on how to grow weed. And if you're looking for more information, I always recommend people asking other people and other growers, because there's a lot of times that they'll go through the same problems that you'll have gone through. Okay. So you can find, you can learn through their experiences and their journeys. And also I'm always available through email, and I answer emails on a regular basis, just helping people with their backyard grows. So yeah, I'm happy to answer emails like that.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Mike. That was a really cool spin on all the takes of how to grow good weed at home. And like I said, He's from Reefertilizer. The Trio kit is part of our Grow Good Weed starter kits that are on the Botanist.ca. And it includes the cannabis cultivating beginner's guide. It includes all the steps. It's a very simple product to use, and that's why we love it. And they're local, another reason why we love it. So that was amazing. We are going to segue over to Philip Robert, who is from Teragenic Solutions. Philip has over 15 years of experience as a designated or master grower. He but he used to work for Northern Lights and was growing for people who had licenses. He's managed, up to 1,000 plants at any given time, which is just crazy. So he's experienced all the issues that someone can experience for indoor and outdoor. We're so excited to have him here. And just so you know, Teragenic Solutions is just on the Quebec side. They are a storefront where they sell everything from hydroponic materials to nutrients to soil, absolutely everything that you need for growing cannabis, whether indoor or outdoor. So Phil, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And very nice presentation, Mike. Thank you. It was great, and I'm looking forward to reading a bit more about your products.
Anytime.
Thank you. So as Emma said, we are a store. We're located right on the other side of the river from Ottawa. We do cater to clientele from your personal grower from 4 plants to the big LPs that do sell to the LCBO, well, the private stores in Ontario or the SQDC in Quebec, or any of those stores. If you're talking about Hexo, and it's not one of our clients, but we have clients of that magnitude, and we do cater to clients that just want 1 or 2 plants. I'm gonna go through a presentation that we made at the Ottawa Cannabis Expo a few months ago, and you will see that I'm going to concentrate a little more on the fertilizers from Advanced Nutrients. It is one of our biggest sellers, and you'll see why a little later. And
those
Emma, should I go directly into the presentation?
In the kits, right? These are those Advanced Nutrients that you're talking about. That's the company there.
Yes. Those are 2 additives. It's not our base, but yes, they're 2 of our main, and most people have at least seen the logo of the Big Bud somewhere. They're really recognized and one of the biggest in the market, but they are not organic, well, not this line at least. Should I go straight into the presentation?
Yeah, you know what, I think I'll ask a couple quick questions here. Just in the poll, just to see where we're at with everybody. I don't know if it's going to ask all the questions at once or one by one, but we're about to find out. So I'm going to just launch this here. So you know what? It's just a sidebar. So for anyone who's joining us on Zoom, there's a poll that's been launched. Feel free to fill it out. As I mentioned, it's totally anonymous. It's also not mandatory. So fill it out if you like, but like I said, it will help us to kind of gauge how we continue this workshop and form future workshops. But yes, absolutely, Philip, take it away. You can start your presentation, and yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Okay, so let's hope this works.
Yeah, let's take it for a spin.
Okay.
Perfect.
Can you guys see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay. So, like I said, I'm from Teragenic Solutions, and this is our logo. So we'll be going through the medium, the air, the water, ventilation, soil, nutrients, pH balance, harvesting, curing, and storing. It will be a bit quick at some stages, so if you want, just ask a question, but it is a long presentation, so I will be going through it. Again, if you have any questions, just stop me and I will clarify.
Yeah, absolutely.
So getting started, again, we are going to talk about your budget, the medium you want to use, your space to use, if you're indoor, outdoor, if you're retrofitting, if you're buying an enclosed space like a tent. We're going to talk about temperature, humidity, light and air quality. We're going to talk about some nutrients. Again, I will be talking more about advanced, but I will touch on other brands at the same time. We're going to quickly touch on harvesting, curing, and storing. So choosing your method, the first thing is, it is expensive depending on if you're going outside or inside, what kind of light you want to use, what kind of ventilation system, and any other equipment that you want to buy. People do get surprised at the cost of most of these objects, especially controllers and lights. They do tend to get really expensive depending on what end of the spectrum you're looking for and what quality you're looking for. So one of the first things is the budget. The second is the space. So if you're not inside, I'm mostly going to concentrate on inside. So if you have a 4-foot ceiling, or if you have a 10-foot ceiling, if you have a little space in your garage that's 4 foot by 4 foot, or you're taking your whole garage, that will depend largely, that will affect largely your budget and what kind of plants you can put and how many you can put. Then we go to equipment. There is always low end to high end equipment on anything that you do, whether it be sports or school or anything. The same thing is applicable here. So the higher end equipment in most cases usually is better, but not always. And then we're going to your future plant size, which has a lot to do with your space size, which is the size of your space, but also a lot with how high your room is that you want to use. And that will make a big difference also for light, because the light will take space, and also there needs to be a buffer between your light and the floor, and that will also really manage the size of your plants that you can actually have. So very fast, we're going to go through a couple methods. There's the subcurrent culture method. So as you can see, there's a flow of water that will constantly go under your buckets. It's automated feeding. You put your water, do I have my cursor, in this bucket, and it's a constant flow that goes into your buckets and waters directly your roots. So there's no earth, there's no compound to hold your roots. It is a bare root system. The advantages of this is it does go faster because your plants can absorb the nutrients right away, and it gives a bigger mass, different taste. The inconvenience with this is if you have any mistake in your mix for your fertilizer or your pH, it will directly affect your plants and right away. And it is really hard to get back to that if you make a big mistake. If you put too much fertilizer and you burn your plants, or your pH is not the right pH balance, it will directly affect your plant, and you'll see the transition in like an hour. And it is really hard to bring them back after that, because there's no buffer from your solution to your roots. This is just a picture of what it can look like after. So as you can see, there's no soil, there's no compound. It's pure root mass going straight through the water. So you can see how putting any fertilizer in there will directly affect your plants. So this is an ebb and flow table. A lot of small growers like to use this. You can put your plants in the clay pellets that are in the pots on top. Every plant has its own pot, and it is a raise and lower system. So you have your water in the basin here, and twice a day, give or take, with a timer, it raises the water to the table, floods it, and then drains it back into the container. You need to change your water about once a week, because every time you raise it, the plants obviously use some of the nutrients that are used to produce the plant. And then every time it goes back into your reservoir, it has those lacking in nutrients. At the same time, also your pH after a week will unbalance, and you don't want that to keep on going for too long, because your plant does need a specific pH to grow at optimal speeds and growth. Here, very fast, not many people use this, but we thought of including it. It's Aeroponics. So as you can see, it's a bare root system again. The roots are hanging, and it's a mist that goes through. It is on a timer, and it just does go a lot more often than the two others, just because obviously the roots are aired and they can dry very quickly. And if that happens, they'll have trouble absorbing anything. But it is a very high oxygen-rich environment, which the plants tend to like a lot. This is one of the systems that most commercial growers like. Some small growers use it too. It is a drip system. So basically you have your reservoir that pumps water through those drips, and it goes plant by plant. And as you can see, the droplets goes into either your clays. You can have earth, Pro Mix, or Coco Coir. One of the things that you have to watch out for this is most plants, even if they are uniform, they don't necessarily drink at the same time. And if they accumulate too much water, or if one plant doesn't need water that day and it keeps on watering, you can have root rot, which means it'll become too heavy and you do want to let it dry a bit. So just to be careful if you are using a system like this, to make sure that all the plants need it, or to adjust your system once in a while and just make sure that all the plants that are too wet and don't need watering get a time to dry out. And this system is really easily to upscale to a big warehouse facility. That's why most commercial growers like this system, because you can eat everything from one station without necessarily hand watering, and it's also less less damaging for your plants, and having bare root is easily manageable, and there is a buffer. So we're gonna go to 2 mediums. A lot of new growers, I like to recommend mediums. The reason for this is, again, that buffer. That means you're not necessarily watering the roots directly, so you're watering the Coco Coir or the peat moss before, so there is a buffer. So if there's a mistake or a pH off balance in the water you're gonna water, mistakes happen, this will give you a buffer. If you have too much ppm, meaning too much fertilizer in your water, again, you'll have time to notice changes in your plant, and you'll have time to flush out your pots to make sure you don't kill off your plants straight away. Let's go fast to Coco Coir. It is more porous than Pro Mix. Both are soilless mix, so it is not a soil. It's basically just a compound to hold your roots together. The difference between Coco Coir and Pro Mix is that usually the fertilizer for Coco Coir binds to the Coco Coir before going to the plant. So that's the electroplastin that you see here. And also Coco Coir needs a little more sensi-cal, so calcium and magnesium. It doesn't bind as well from the Coco Coir to the plant, and it is a deficiency that most growers will see if you're using Coco Coir, is to add that. And most products that are specifically designed for Coco Coir will have that additive added inside of their mix. Now we're gonna go with Pro Mix. This is personally my soilless mix of choice. My partner also, this is one of our biggest sellers. And as you can see, this is one of our growers that did this, one of our clients. So it is a decent nug. Obviously, there's a lot more than just Pro Mix that went into making this. There was updressing, there's the nutrients, there's the light, there's the CO2, but it gives you an idea that with this mix, this is what you can produce. And it is, again, I use advanced nutrients, and it is very well mixable. And most of our top growers that don't use organic blends, we try to push them towards this. So, okay, let's talk quickly about retrofitting a place. As you can see, this is a tent. What we're gonna talk about here, the size and size of your space, the type, the height, and the retrofit.
And
so there's a big difference if you have a little.
Can I just interrupt you quickly for a second? Just can you
break
down what retrofitting means for people? This is essentially for those who want to grow indoors. You get a tent. It's an indoor tent for growing your cannabis, correct?
Yes.
Ish.
Well, retrofitting in itself is basically taking an area that's already built and just customizing it to grow. So let's say you have a garage or a basement. So you want to make sure you retrofit. The big point, and I know a lot in the past we've heard about this, is that you can demolish a house by growing plants in it. This is partly true. When you go to retrofit, especially if you're not going in a tent and you have a bit more, let's say 20, 30 plants with double-ended lights, You don't want the humidity to get into your house, get mold, and have to have, after that, demolish it. I'm sure most of you have seen TV shows that they had to go in, spray, or the house was no longer sellable. So
Right.
a big part of this retrofit is to put a plastic barrier and to make sure that you have a negative, which means something, which is a fan, pulling out air constantly from that room, so it stops from going into your house, so you don't damage the structure itself. What it should be, a house, a garage, or anything, if it's retrofitting a place, you want to make sure that the humidity doesn't stay in your house and that you don't damage it. It's, your house is your biggest investment, and saving a few dollars on cannabis will not replace your foundation. So it is a good idea to make sure that when you retrofit, you can account for humidity and heat, and make sure that it doesn't go back or seep back into your house to damage the braces and the foundation.
Okay, that's a great.
So again, there's a height. The height is usually 6 feet becomes low, 8 feet is good, 10 feet is terrific, but most people don't have 10 feet to play with, unfortunately. So when we're talking about retrofitting, so there's 3 types. First is the grow boxes. These are new, they're on the market, they're beautiful, but they are commercial, meaning they're already pre-built with the light, with the fan, with the timers, and they're rigid, which means it looks really sleek. I've seen a couple that look almost like fridges that you can put in your apartment, and you can almost not tell that it's a growing area. It's really sleek, really nice, and they tend to be really expensive, but really durable. When you go to grow tents, what's fun with this is you can choose the size of your grow tent. 2x2, 3x3, 8x10. It's really adjustable. And with that, you can also adjust the type of light you want in it, the type of fans, the type of timers, so you can really customize it to your wants and budget. They're obviously a lot less expensive than grow boxes. And again, depending on your size, you might not have a 4x4, but you might have a 3x6. So you can buy a tent that will fit into those areas. The last one is other spaces, which is what I was talking about earlier, is you just want to put it in your closet, you want to put it in your garage. So it's just to make sure that you can cover that area and to be able to block out the light when you switch into flower. So when you do this, you want to make sure that you have 4 walls, and that you, when you do end up being in the flowering stage, that you can actually block out the light for those 12 hours to make sure that they don't turn and there's a low stress environment for your plant, which will be one of the most important parts for your flowering stage, which is turning that daylight time to 12 hours on, 12 hours off. Outside, obviously not an issue because you don't have the option of controlling the sun, and mid-August usually they start flowering, so it is what it is. And for auto flowers plants, well, they do what they want, and once they decide to flower, they flower. So really quick for lights. Right now, this is an example of the new lights on the market. It is a double-ended 1,000-watt ballast and ball. What's important here is we've seen a lot of LEDs come on the market. Some are good and some are really, really not good. If you're going to buy one of those LEDs right now, the ones that compare to this light are going for about $2,500. If you are buying an LED light from Amazon and you are paying $300, you are paying for what you get. The quality and the technology is not there yet to have a 1,000-watt light that's LED for $300. It's just unfortunately not feasible. We've had a lot of clients come in and show us their light, bring their lights in, bring the red, blue spectrums, and they just don't give that high intensity quality light that you need to get those hard quality buds and the crystals that come out. It ends up looking more like outdoor that was a bit of in the shade. We have also to say that these lights produce a lot of heat and take up enough electricity. It's like running a fridge or a baseboard heater every time it's on. And for the heat, it is almost like a baseboard heater. It does produce a lot of heat. And if you're keeping this light in an enclosed space, well, we'll be talking about this later, you need to take that heat out to make sure that you don't burn your plants. Okay, so let's talk about water for 2 seconds. So accessibility, quality, drainage, and nutrients. So first, the access. Depending if you're in the city or in the country, there's 2 different types of water. In the city, there's chlorine or phosphorus, fluoride, français, du fluor, sorry. So in the water. So one of the things we do mention to people is either to get an RO system, which will take out those particles, or to let it sit for about 24 hours so the chlorine or the fluoride gets evaporated. And we can also use a bubbler to make sure that the water doesn't stay stagnant and doesn't start to get bacteria. In the country, there's a little difference depending on the watering system you get and what vein you get for your water, which is where I'm located right now. You can also get a high level of minerals in this water. I have a lot of sulfur, which changes the amount of ppms that you have in your water. So that's a really good idea if you can get an RO system, or just to keep that in mind when you're adding nutrients, that there is residual minerals in your water. So that goes with your quality and your access. For your drainage, again, once you water, where does it go? Again, you don't want to throw it anywhere. The big places usually use their water once and then throw it out. Personally, I try to water and not have a lot of drainage. So I just water what my plant needs. And I keep it up like this so I don't waste any nutrients or water itself. But it is to make sure that it is still a chemical. You don't want to put it too much into the drains. You don't want to affect the nature more than that. You can reuse that water to go into your garden too. It is really good nutrients that you can use for tomatoes, your lettuce, but just make sure that you don't waste it or at least damage the environment. We're a little conscious still. We try to be at least. And the nutrients. Again, there's a lot of nutrients, whether it be organic, chemical, or anything that you can put in soil to mix in. Again, I'm looking forward to reading about Mike's and nutrients, which is a mix that you can put into Promex or anything else, which is terrific because it is a step to take away. Very fast.
You just really quickly here, Philip, because we have
Sorry.
we have a question, and I thought it would be a good time while we're still not completely away from lights. The question is from Scott. He is asking, so you're saying that LEDs using COBs at 2400 watts isn't going to produce high quality cannabis?
There is some LEDs that do, some companies that are out there. I'd say we have Fluence, we have Spider that we have tested in store and we have tested for production that do give really good quality.
Okay.
But a lot of them, unfortunately, are on the low spectrum. If you're going to go into LED, which takes a lot of problems out of the heat, I would spend a bit more, splurge a bit more on the light, which is one of the main parts of your grow up. So I would splurge a bit more and go into the higher end spectrum of those LED lights. It's just from what we've seen. Again, it's not all LEDs, and we've talked to manufacturers that are bringing down the cost and that are doing tests right now to cut almost the cost in half. But right now, the good LEDs are about 3 to 4 times in CMH or a metal highlight. So I'm not saying that you won't get anything, and it depends also what kind of quality you want. But if you're going to go through LED, it's just try to go on the upper scale of what's available.
And it kind of goes back to you get what you pay for. Spending $300 on an LED light on Amazon isn't going to necessarily yield you the results that you want? So I think that's a really good question. And thank you for bringing more light to that.
Nice one.
Okay, I'm done. Okay, please continue.
Retrofitting for ventilation. So there's two things here. First, if you want the plants to breathe, basically it's like lungs. So they need air movement. So lungs can move air. So you bring it in, you bring it out. Plants don't move. So you need fans to act like your lung to make sure that there's air movement in the room so that it can get the CO2 that it needs to produce oxygen. And just a quick note that during the night, it does produce CO2 and use oxygen, but that's just a side note. So one of the first things, yes, is airflow and circulation. You want to make sure that you always have some airflow so the plants can breathe. And again, if you're retrofitting a place, have a negative, which means taking air out of your space always, so that you're not, first of all, it'll control the smell, and it will protect the rest of your area. The heat part is very simple, unless you're using LED, which you can, which doesn't produce a lot of heat. If you're using any of the double-ended lights, obviously, or single-ended, they're producing a lot of heat, and you want to make sure that you can take that out. So that usually intakes on putting, let's say, a carbon filter, which will help with the smell, and putting an inline fan on a timer, which is not in the picture. But basically, the controller usually can set on and off when the maximum heat is attained. So it goes on, takes the air out, cools your room, brings it down to a more normal temperature, and the cycle continues. So every time it hits that plateau, the controller will go on and pull the air out. And that's, again, if you don't have an AC, which goes to the same thing. If you have a bigger room and you actually need an AC, let's say you have 8 lights or 10 lights in a room, obviously a fan won't do. So you do need an AC. Well, the AC will be on the timer when it hits, let's say, 26, 27. The AC comes on, it brings it back down, and the cycle continues. Just control your temperature. For the odor, again, I know it's legal, but a lot of people would like to control, or at least not announce and flag to people that, yes, I'm growing cannabis. So you put a filter on, it takes off the smell, and it just controls that smell so you don't tell your neighbors. Plus, again, you never know, you don't want anyone to look or be too curious, so it just controls the odor. For CO2, again, the plant needs CO2 like we need oxygen to breathe. For CO2, there's this different methods to produce it. The 3 main methods would be naturally, which is a little container, or yeast. Basically, our container is the same thing. It's from TBN. You put water, you shake it, it smells like beer. So basically, you're fermenting, and that CO2 that's caused by fermenting will go into your plants, and it's natural. It doesn't cause heat or fire hazards. It's really good for small tents. Really hard to use for big grow ops because it is very small and you don't want to be putting yeast everywhere in your room, but it is possible. The other one is burning. So it's like a barbecue. There's CO2 burners which use either propane or natural gas, and is literally like a barbecue, almost the same gauges. So you put that control into your room, and when the CO2 goes lower than what you want, it turns on, and when you hit your maximum, it turns off. So you keep putting CO2 in your room. Again, for this CO2, if you go outside, the ppm of CO2 is roughly between 450 and 550 in the atmosphere. Well, you can actually, in peak flowering stage, have around 1200 ppms, which parts per million. So you can really bring up that CO2 in your room, and that will really exponentially help your growth of your plant. So it is good to have CO2 in. And also, if you're in an enclosed space, during the day, if your plants are eating CO2, literally, as soon as the lights turn on, you're bringing your CO2 level down. So it is good to be able to produce CO2 to help your plants grow. My preferred right now is liquid propane. I have a burner and a controller, and I set it once I put stop vegging. At vegging, I leave it as it is at 450, 550, and then I gradually go up to 1200, 1250, and slowly, gradually go back down to 800 before I harvest. Again, very fast. We don't need to talk about this because we talked about it a lot. It's to make sure that you take care of your environment outside of your grow up. Again, you don't want to damage whatever else is around. So this is very quickly for a small grower what you would basically need for a like your basic operation. Everything is there. Once you have this, you can have either in your tent or your cabinet. As long as you have most of these things, you'll be able to grow.
I just took a
So your pots, your reservoir, sorry?
I just took a screenshot of that. Sorry if the sound was
Okay.
there. I love this list. I feel like it's a shopping list for people that are looking to get all the necessities, to know what they need to get in order to start growing themselves. So this is awesome.
Yeah, it's basically it. Yeah, at least a starter kit shopping list. And with this, yeah, you can grow in your tent or your cabinet. Okay, choosing your plant. So going from clones or going from seeds, we'll talk about, just give me one sec. Okay, yes. We'll talk about clones first. So what's good with cloning is you already know what you're getting, which means it comes from a predetermined plant, and usually it's called the mother, so you know it's female, you know when you're gonna flower, you're not gonna have a male like Mike was talking about earlier. At least you know that you're not gonna midway through summer have a male that's pollinating the community and that everyone's gonna be mad at you afterwards. A lot of people find this hard to do, but as long as you control it well, it is quite easy and quite manageable. So you need a tray dome. To clone itself, if you do have a mother, the only thing you need on that plant is a fan leaf, which is the leaf that you usually see anywhere commercially, so that pot leaf, and you need a new shoot. So you need both. You cannot have only one or the other. The fan leaf will basically give you that sun and that energy, and the shoot itself will be growing. If you don't have a shoot, as much energy as you're making, the plant won't grow because it needs new growth. And if you only have that shoot, unfortunately, a lot of times it's just not creating enough energy to produce the roots and to grow again to go. The humidity usually is found about 70% in those domes. And I like to keep my room at about 26 outside of that. And sorry if you hear noise in the back. I am still at the store. Again, some people put heating mats below, either for seeding or cloning. It's not necessary, but it does help a little. I personally don't use any. I just try to keep my room at least at 25 Celsius and then look at my clones. After about 5 days, you can open to make sure that all the yellow leaves, everything that's dying off, you cut off, and you make sure that there's no mold. Once the mold sets in, it can take even like 12 hours a day to completely ravage your tray. And what's really not fun about this is you can look at it from up top and everything will be beautiful, but all the plants, all the leaves that are actually rotting are underneath and you don't see them. It's the leaves that don't get light. So once those start, and if you miss it from the top and you don't take time to open the tray and look at it, you can lose your complete tray or your complete clones in a matter of hours. And honestly, you can cry. I almost have once. I lost. Anyway, it's not funny a bit now, but it goes fast. So just to make sure that you do look underneath, to make sure that you take off everything that's yellow and that has a little mold producing, to make sure that you don't lose your entire clones. And again, just a recap, clones, it comes from a mother. You know what you're going to get. You know the type of weed you're going to get. You know you're not going to get a male. That's the advantage of this. And also, once you have your clone that you like, You don't need to buy expensive seeds anymore because you always have that mother that you can keep alive and clone off of.
Yeah.
Very fast, I've heard, sorry.
I think that's amazing. And also, you know, you don't have to worry about the success rate for germinating your seeds, and worrying about that too, because seeds are expensive, and it's nice knowing what you're going to get in terms of strain, in terms of what you got, you know, the last time you grew from the mother. So cloning is essentially, if you were to take a clone from a plant, for people who may not know, is just, it's called topping as well, isn't it? Where you just cut a top off. It's basically propagating. So it's another method to buying seeds. I'm not sure if you're able to buy clones. I think some LPs do sell clones, but for the most part, I think the majority of the public is stuck with buying seeds.
Yeah, I know a couple of LPs will be starting, and Indian Reserves I've heard sell clones, but yeah, it will be in the next few years, I'm hoping, because it would help the market for at least small growers to just get a variety and not have to worry about this step and just get a quality clone in the mail. I'm looking forward to it. Oh, okay, let's talk about seeds then for 2 seconds. So there's, we had three types of seeds. There's the normal seeds, there's the feminized seeds, and autoflowers. So very fast autoflowers, I personally don't like, just because you can't control the plant itself. Once you plant it, it decides when it grows, when it flowers. You can't choose the size, the growth, and how long, and you can't clone off of it because it's an autoflower. Once it goes, and it will flower, which means you can't get cloned off a flowering mother.
Okay.
The second is the feminized seeds. So these are seeds, and I'm sure if you guys have been looking on the web for seeds, they have this category, which they almost guarantee you that it is a female seed that you're getting in all female seeds. And usually they are right. There's not many discrepancies in this, not many males mixed up in the batch, which is good, which means that once you plant this, you're guaranteed to have only females. And again, you won't have males propagating and pollinating everything around, and you don't have to watch for it. Some people say that the strain tends to be a little less strong than if you go with normal seeds, but again, always debatable. Normal seeds, it's just seeds that you would get from pollinating. So there will be males and female mixed in, and you want to find the female. So basically you have to grow all of them. Most people then will clone parts of every plant to figure out which are males and which are females, and also to choose their phenotype. And what they mean by this is, like any other plants or humans, they can come from two parents, and obviously your siblings don't look like you because they have different phenotypes. And it's the same thing with the plant. You might get a plant that produces really big buds, and it's from the same mother and dad, and basically the other one will produce almost nothing. So what you want to do, and you can do this with feminized seeds too, is to find the phenotype that produces better, that has a better smell, the better taste, the better THC or CBD. Mm-hmm. And you want to keep that one as a mother afterwards to clone it. It is a long process. So if you want to skip all of that, I do recommend just going to feminized seeds, so you won't need to find out if it's a male. And it's a lot faster to find a phenotype afterwards, because you just need to clone it, not worry about the males, and see what it gives, or just flower all of them and figure out what they give and just clone. For the cloning also, some people have been are again debating if using the same mother or using a clone as a mother through generations will decrease the yield and CBD and THC. I'm not a chemist or a biologist. I haven't done the testing, but from my experience, I haven't seen much difference. I have a personal strain that I enjoy, that I've kept for years, and it still produces what I want, the same smell, the same effect. And I just don't see that much of an issue with it. but some people swear that you need to keep the mother from the seed to have the best yield, and yes, CBD and THC. I just haven't seen so much of a difference to make it a big deal.
Thank you for that. I think that's also another really neat benefit of cloning, just to go back to like the phenotype and to explain that a bit more, genotype versus phenotype. Your genotype is your genes, what your genetics say, and two clones may have the same genes, but phenotypically or physically what they look like can be very different. So if one is producing bigger buds, maybe you want to clone off of that mother plant so that you can kind of keep those phenotypic traits carrying on. So I think that's really interesting. I do have a quick question here from somebody in the group. They are asking, how early on can you tell if you have a female or a male plant?
Unfortunately, it usually goes to flowering. So it's not even in veg. Some people have said they can see it in veg. I personally can't usually tell, but usually it is when it flowers. Fortunately, the male does flower just a little sooner than the female. And the male will produce a little grapish thing on the node where the branches intersect. So it'll look like grapes coming down. And the female is what you usually see like here, a little flower and white hairs will produce. Mm-hmm. There's always a chance that it's both, but in general, it's one of the two. At that point, you really just need to keep attention and pay an eye to catch them, unfortunately. You need to find the male if there's any and take it out, unless you want to do seeds. But it is just once it's in flower, to make sure that you see it. You'll start seeing white hairs on the female in about a week and a half, 2 weeks. And the male is just a little sooner. So if you start looking at the transition a week afterwards, you might be able to see that little grape. And those are basically the pollinating flowers that will produce pollen and spread.
So it really just comes down to really being vigilant. If you didn't buy feminized seeds, if you're not, starting with the clone, is constantly checking on your seedling as it gets more and more leaves and grows bigger and bigger. It's kind of a nice way too, especially right now, to practice mindfulness and be sort of in the moment and go through your routine of checking on your plants. Oh, do I notice any grapes coming or showing, or am I noticing some hairs, to kind of determine whether or not this is a male or female. But I found, at least when I didn't have feminized seeds or anything like that, that it was pretty obvious. I can't remember how long it took. I would say the plant was about this tall. It was about this old, if that makes sense. But I started noticing the little balls showing. Kind of an easy way to remember if it's female or male is little balls will show on the males. And I noticed it right away. And I knew it was a male. So those are some things to look for. But thank you. That answers the question for sure.
Okay. Growing cycle. So there's vegetative and flowering. Okay. So very quick, vegetative, especially if you're in a controlled environment. Outside, unfortunately, until start of August, mid-August, you're in veg, which means you're not going to produce flowers. The plant is growing. So depending on how early in the season, obviously this year, depending on where you are, I'm not sure about Vancouver or BC, but over here, we had a really, really bad spring. So plants have been going out later, but that means that from now till August, they're basically in veg. They won't produce any flowers. It's not like veg soon, like a month after you're going to have flowers. It is with the sun. It is photo controlled. So regardless of when you plant it, early August to mid-August, it starts flowering, seeing the flowers soon after that. And there's nothing you can do about that because it's controlled by the sun. And we don't control the sun, unfortunately. Inside, oh, that's fun. Okay. Inside, it is all up to you. basically, I prefer, and we recommend over here, is to have your photocycle of 18 hours of sun or light to 6 hours of night. Basically, it's on a timer, it's regulated, it goes on. And as long as you keep that photocycle on, it will stay in vegetative state unless it's an autoflower. When you want to turn your plants to the flowering stage, you will be going 12 hours on of light and 12 hours off of light. So basically, you choose when you want to make your plant flower. And this can also help you because we talked a little earlier about plant size, which means you can control how big your plant is going to get by when you turn your lights. So if you have an 8-foot ceiling, obviously you can't wait till your plant is 6 foot. Once you turn, your plant can actually grow by 1/3 to 1/2 of its size. So if your plant is about 3 feet when it's in veg and you switch the cycle, it can get up to 4.5 feet to 6 feet high. So again, that depends on the genetic and everything, but the idea that it will grow a lot after you flip, and you want to consider that you need space between your light. If it's an LED, a bit less, but if it's a double-ended light, you need about 2 feet to 2.5 feet space from the light to the top bud, so you don't burn it and it doesn't get too yellow. So you have to keep an eye on that. If it's your first time with that strain, sometimes a little harder because you don't know the impact of switching your cycle will do and how big it'll get. But you want to make sure that you take in consideration that you want about 2 feet to 2.5 feet from your light, and that it will grow that much once you turn the cycle from 18/6 to 12/12. Flowering cycle 12/12. Again, depending on your seeding, your genetic usually goes from 8 weeks to 12 weeks, something in that sort. Most people like a fast flowering stage, which is 8 and 9 weeks, just because you can turn over faster and you don't keep it that long into vegetative stage, which is the most critical stage. So once you go to 12/12, usually this is told on your pack of seeds. A lot of people come in and they don't know, but usually I don't know all genetics. So I just tell them when you buy your seeds, or if you buy a clone from someone or an enterprise, ask, how long is my flowering cycle? And then it's just a matter of following a calendar. A lot of people are like, well, is this ready? Are the hair ambers? Most people that sell seeds will tell you, or people that sell clone will tell you, this is an 8-week or 9-week. It takes a lot of the guessing out of it. You just know, my plant will be ready in 8 weeks. I follow this pattern, I'm done. I don't have to worry and look with a not binocular, but anyway, I don't have to look at the hairs and see if it's ready. I know it's an 8-week, I know it's a 9-week. It also helps you on the fertilizing stage. So again, yeah, this presentation was made for a show where we had Advanced Nutrients as a partner. It is what I use when my partner uses. It is one of our best sellers. I'll go through why very shortly, but there's a lot of different nutrients on the market, from organic to bios that you mix with the soil to chemical, and even the chemicals from advanced. There's Psycho, Current Culture, Canna, a lot of different fertilizers, and they mostly do the same thing and have the same base nutrients and the same additives, just different brands, different quality also, and different prices. So very quick, Advanced Nutrients has a line. This is the base, the Grow Micro Bloom, which came in with some of the information. It is pH perfect. What this does, and it doesn't adjust your pH, it's because of the quality of the nutrients that are in the products. It opens the window of pH that you can have. So instead of having 6.2 to 6.5 or 6.4, it opens that window from 5.5 to 6.5 window of pH. Oh, okay. And you can see that it just opens that window. And what What is terrific about this is when you water with this, they actually recommend not to adjust your pH, which means you're not playing with pH, you're not playing with a pen with it, which is expensive. And if you mix up your pH balancing and you go lower, and then it's really not recommended to put pH up to put it higher because it debalances your nutrients. So this takes all of that out. So instead of having a bad pH or having to throw out your mix because you had to regulate it a couple times, this takes that part of it out for you. Just a very quick note on advanced nutrients. It does say on the bottle to go to 4 milliliters per liter. Unfortunately, we never recommend this. At the max, we recommend for the base nutrient to go halfway through, which is 2 mLs, maximum 2.5 mLs per liter in peak flowering. And when you're just starting off in veg, we even recommend to go to 1 milliliter. But it does say 4 on the bottle. It is just, we've seen so many clients, and I've tried it, and burning their plants. It is a chemical, it is not organic. So the plants do need a specific level, and it can really damage your plant if you do unfortunately, follow the manufacturer's instructions. You can damage your plant. I haven't seen a client yet come in that used 4 mLs that has not burned his plant, which is truly unfortunate. So we do recommend to go halfway. I only go 2 for about a week or 2. I go 2.5, but that's basically what I go, and that's in peak flowering. Base nutrients, we have the Coco, we have the Grow Micro Bloom, and the Connoisseur, which are all pH perfect. And the Coco has more magnesium, calcium to go with the Coco mix. The Grow Micro Bloom is our biggest seller, and the Connoisseur is just the base with a bit more additives. It has a humic fulvic acid, which is H in earth. It's just a little better, a little more expensive, but we don't recommend this one just because it's more expensive, and you can calibrate your mix better if you just take the regular base. So I'm going to do a really, really quick overview of some of the additives. Vuju juice, unfortunately, will be discontinued. A lot of brands have. It is for roots, root propagation. It will be discontinued, unfortunately. I'm guessing it's an old slide and it's still there, but a lot of companies do have root shooters, root accelerators, and it does help, and it propagates the roots. B52, it's a multivitamin for plants. Same as you go in your cabin in the morning, you have a multivitamin. It's about the same thing. It has 52 essential vitamins and vitamin B. It is really good. I use it, and it just helps give a more uniform feeding to your plant. Bud Igniter does exactly what it says. So it ignites your bud. It will give you a couple days sooner on your flowering stage. It'll also stop your plant a little from stretching, so your buds will be a little closer. So instead of having your buds move like scattered, they'll be a bit tighter and a bit bigger. Quite expensive, not necessary, but if you're looking for their tight buds or you're a commercial grower, it is a very good product to have. Big Bud, again, this is the main additive we use. Again, same as the name says, it is the main one. It helps just to grow your flower. It is a big bud. There's not much. There is on the organic side a Big Bud organic, but basically it is the main additive we use, and we use it for the most part of the flowering. Very quick overdrive. It is the week before flushing. This is a hardener, so the bud won't necessarily get bigger, but the new flower shoots will appear, and it is one of the only products that from most chemical lines that you see definite change in the plant the next day or the day after. You will see new white hairs coming out, and basically the plant itself won't get the bud itself won't get bigger, but the flowers inside will get bigger, so the bud gets denser and harder. I actually enjoy this product. Flawless Finish, it's a flushing agent. If you flush, you can. I flush mostly with water. I've used it once or twice. I haven't seen much of the difference, but it is flushing again to take out, especially if you're using chemicals like this, to take out the chemicals through the plant. I've noticed that I've cloned off plants and veg right after watering, and I could actually see the purple of the grow micro bloom going through the plant while I was cutting to clone. So obviously the chemicals do sip up through the plant and stay there. So it's just to use water and to flush that out. It's some people see a taste, some don't, but some people rather have it more organic at the end, even if they've used chemicals. Again, flawless finish, not necessarily. Good old H2O will do the trick if you use it at least for 1 week. So why so many products very fast? You don't need all of them. If you ever go to the event site or any other site that have chemical fertilizers, there's like 15, 20 additives. Is it necessary? No. As long as you have your base, you'll get a decent crop from most companies. The additives is usually to do something specific. We have additives to add crystals. We have additives to make the plant tougher or drought resistant. Is it necessary? Depending on what you want to do, maybe. If you're growing outside, you might want something that helps your plant be drought resistant. But if you're going inside and you're going to water every day, it's not necessary. So yes, there's a whole line of products from most companies that aren't needed. And honestly, it would be fun, like some companies like Mike, which I hope you'll be able to get in touch afterwards to talk about your products. But it is a lot simpler to just mix and go. And I'm looking forward to when companies start to draw down all those additives, because it can get really expensive and really complicated. But yes, with that, you can cater to your plants and specific needs, results, and depending if you want THC or CBD. I was missing a, okay. Very fast, we're gonna go trimming, drying, and curing. I'm sorry if it's taking a long time. So I'm just, and I'm sorry if I'm talking fast. I just want to get through it well and give you guys a lot of information. So trimming, or when you cut, you're done, you put all your labor, you had that veg state, you had those 2 months of flower. Now it's time to crop, to benefit from all that labor, all that energy and time that you put into your plants. So we're cropping. There's different ways to crop. These are obviously scissors, and this is a machine. It's from the Twister line, which is this is a T6. They have bigger machines. This is basically here. There's two methods. So if you're using a machine, which is this, or you're doing it by hand, you want to take the nugs off, and then you dry it in this rack. What is good with this is that it takes a lot less space. So once you put it on, you can scatter it in a smaller area, and it doesn't take as much space as hanging it like this.
I will just interrupt you.
Hanging like this has the advantage that it does keep growing a little bit after you cut it, and it takes all the juices and terpenes and brings it down to the top buds. But it does take a lot of space. What I prefer to do when we dry is, at least for the first couple of days, is drop the humidity level in that room to about 40%. The reason for this is if you have big buds, but if you have a room that looks like this, or your screen is a little too thick, you want to get the main water out of your buds before it starts to rot. And it is always easier to put humidity back into your flower than it is to take mold out.
Right.
So if you have a big crop and you want to skip mold and you want to dry it out, dry it out as quick as possible. And then afterwards, you can always bring your humidity back up with those Bavita packs that Emma showed earlier in her big jar. Or you can actually bring the room itself back to about 55 to 60 by putting a humidifier in your room and just re-humidifying everything.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Well, a question and a comment For starters, I love this drying rack. I remember you showed me one at your store when I came and visited, and I just thought that was so amazing and so just clever, because you're right, it does really work towards like managing surface area. Not everyone has a whole lot of space to dry their bud. And I kind of experienced this issue last year when I was first growing my plants. I thought, okay, well, how am I going to dry this? I can't dry it outside. You kind of have to dry it somewhere where it's dark as well. That's ideal. Doesn't sunlight kind of destroy THC?
A little, yeah.
Little. So I
Yeah.
ended up using a screen door. I took the screen door off my back door and put it on 2 paint cans in my garage. And I mean, it worked amazingly. Like, you do want to make sure that there's airflow so that it evenly dries and there's no mold forming, because mold can happen so quickly, right? In a matter of days, and then you lose your whole crop. So the drying process is so, so important.
Yeah. Well, again, yeah, I laugh because we must have all done this once or twice. You have nothing to do and you're like, what do I have on hand? Anyway, so yeah, basically I like these. Again, now, like I said, I do dry like this, but I rehumidify after using this, because unfortunately the machines, they don't do a terrific job. So if you want a nice looking bud, you actually have to retouch it. But if you're not picky and you're just gonna use it anyway to do butter or extracts or smoke it, it's just a little more, so it doesn't matter afterwards. Curing, yes, curing. So basically that's, after it's dry, you put it in a bucket and you open it, close it for a while. You put those Vivita packs to keep the humidity. I guess that one's at 62. And you do that, it takes out the taste, the smell, the taste, and the terpenes. It's like aging wine. So same as cannabis, you want to age your cannabis, you want it nicer, fuller smell, fuller taste. These are new grow bags on the market that we've tried recently and that we now sell. Basically, they're meant to do your curing for you and control the humidity itself. So once it's close enough to being like about 50%, I know it's usually 60, but this should help you rehumidify it, and it will bring out the terpenes and bring out the smell from your weed or your cannabis. So we've had a lot of good comments. I've tried it on swag, something that smelled like hay, kind of did something, but I've heard good comments from good quality product that wasn't just a test. So we have clients that buy more. Oh, shopping list. Except for this, I am done. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope it was interesting.
That was amazing. Thank you
Thanks
so
for that. Yeah.
much. It was very in-depth, and I really loved the balance that we had in this workshop. Was, you know, we could go into a little bit more depth for those who are joining us that are, you know, more of seasoned veterans, people that have been growing for years, who have grown lots and are maybe looking to take their skills to the next level. We're also looking at, of course, connecting with people that are new to growing and have absolutely no idea, me basically, and just trying to learn the basics. So I think that it's a really amazing start, is to start with our Grow Good Weed starter kits, get in touch with these amazing experts, local experts, Phil and Mike. So I think this was so well done. I know we've had so many comments. We had over 300 people watching at one point on our Facebook Live. So that's really awesome. I'm just going to go ahead and get into the Q&As, because there have been so many amazing questions. And I'll start off with pests. I know that, Philip, you and I had talked about your experience in the past working with outdoor plants, and how you really have no control over humidity. You don't have control over pests. And I was kind of triggering some PTSD for you, bringing you back to those days when you were responsible for managing 1,000 plants. And some of the issues that you experienced, we have had the question come up a couple times on pests. So I'm just going to share my screen here really quickly just to talk about at least two of the usual suspects that you would see that I know a bit about. Aphids, I'll just start here. Cannabis aphids, these are a hemipteran or a sucking insect, and the way they go about destroying your plants, and it's not just cannabis but any of your plants outside or inside if they get inside, is they literally suck all of the nutritional juices out of your plant. So these buggers were all over mine last year, and it was a real pain. I also experienced spider mites. For those of you who are big into gardening, indoor or outdoor, spider mites can completely destroy your crop or your plants, and they can be a real pain to get rid of as well. Philip or Mike, do you guys have any experience with pests for outdoor growers and how to manage them?
Well, we always try to get them out here.
I usually grow indoors, so pests aren't really a big problem for me unless I'm bringing in soil from outside.
Okay.
I've heard of people using ladybugs in their gardens to get rid of those two things, but maybe Phil had some input as well.
First of all, nice pictures. I've never seen a spider mite from this close up before. Nice pictures, ugly bug, but that's okay. What I found for outside is the spider mite part is fun because they have natural predators outside and it gets to be controlled a little easier. But those aphids, for some reason, are a little more damaging outside. Mm-hmm. There's always chemicals that you can spray on, but they will always come back outside. And you don't want to spray when you're in the flowering stage because some of that residue chemical will stay in your flower, and then we either transform it or smoke it, you'll have it. When it comes to inside, I do tend to agree with Mike that unless you bring it in yourself from outside, you shouldn't really get any in, but it usually happens. It sometimes happens, sorry. What we recommend at the store, we have chemicals that we can spray that we only again recommend in veg. And there are now companies, and we have them as suppliers that sell predators, Californicus, or well, I forgot the other name right now, sorry. But basically they're predators that you let go in your garden. So they're bugs, but that only attack the other bugs that will eat the spider mites, that will eat the aphids, and that will go through and not touch your plants. And some actually eat themselves afterwards when there's no more spider mites to eat. So you won't be stuck with them.
I'm actually trying that this year. I've heard ladybugs are a must, and I'm looking at ordering some of those online, but it's essentially introducing a beneficial or predatory insect. And I actually ordered from Costco, believe it or not, 2 praying mantis egg sacs. I'm so excited.
That's cool.
Okay, no, I'm gonna get it one second.
Yeah.
It is cool. Okay. Thank you for agreeing with me. I'm basically like a 6-year-old with my bug.
What?
Look at these things.
Oh, okay. And so they pop out of there?
So like each egg sac can have about up to 100 little baby praying mantids.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Okay.
So it's gonna happen. I'm gonna release them in my backyard. Hopefully they don't get released into my house. But I have actually read and seen people who, you know, they're essentially activated and will start hatching with heat. And I've heard of people who go out and cut down their own Christmas trees and bring them back into the house, and then they wake up a day or two later to hundreds of praying mantises everywhere because there was an egg sac that really looks like any sort of natural matter, little pine cone or something. Mm-hmm. And the heat of being brought inside activates the egg sacs to hatch, and then they're covered in hundreds of little baby praying mantises, which I would honestly not be okay with, but it'll be interesting. So introducing beneficial insects, I think, is a great way to combat pests without going towards chemical pesticides, because you take the risk of consuming those chemicals, right, with the smoke and when you actually get to consuming your bud.
Mm-hmm.
Can I throw a little side note in there? Those praying mantises apparently are terrific predators for those killer wasps that are coming to North America.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just saw a YouTube video, so I just want to throw it in that apparently they kill those killer wasps too. It's interesting. Sorry, just a little
Love it.
bit.
That's ideal. So everyone should order these praying mantis egg sacs. I'm not the everyone should do it. Oh, someone else has said they're trying praying mantis eggs this year. They are so cool. I check it every morning and then every afternoon to see if they've hatched yet. Like, I'm so excited to see it. Okay, I'll move on to another question here. Scott asks, what is the optimum temperature to plant a seedling outdoors?
Well, it can't go below freezing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if that would, my recommendation would at least be like not going lower than even 5 degrees at night is low, because you can always get frost. So maybe 10 degrees during the night, and anything higher, but basically it can't freeze. So anything higher than, at least 8 at night and whatever else during the day, as long as it doesn't freeze or snow. And it's strong enough to hold the changes in temperature.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very bare minimum, because when it's that low, it's going to slow the growth of the plant too, right? So that's why I always say wait till it's a good 15, 18 degrees outside, in the daytime, and start your plants indoors so they grow nice and tall in the warm of your inside, then put them outside. Because if not, it's going to slow down the entire process.
Okay, that's great. This one is for Philip, and it's from Scott. He's using I think this is a light brand called Aglex, Aglex. Have you tested them at all? Do either of you have experience with this brand?
Unfortunately, I've never even heard of it.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Other questions? Have you heard of it? Sorry, Mike.
No, what is it, like an LED light or something?
It's a type of LED light. Yeah, this person has asked if either of you have experience using it, but no, that's fine. Another question here is, why is the voodoo juice nutrient being discontinued? Do you happen to know why? This person apparently loves it and thinks it's amazing.
It's Advanced went through Health Canada in the last year. It is more complicated, and I don't know the ins and outs since I don't work here. But from what I've heard, basically they had to adjust their recipe, and their new recipe wasn't as great, and they just decided to not continue it. They'll be discontinuing the piranha and tarantula also. So basically anything with live substance in, I believe Advance is almost discontinuing those products. They're coming back with the Sensi A and B, but basically the voodoo, tarantula, and the piranha will be discontinued, which is not terrific, because I did like voodoo also, but there are all other companies that do as good of a job for rooting substances. So you can look around, Psycho has it, Cano has a good one too. So there are a lot of options that you can look at to just substitute it, sorry.
Okay, thank you. I have a question here from someone who is growing an autoflower strain. And the question is that their autoflower plant is dying. It suddenly started to thin out, and parts of it almost dried up completely. Any ideas as to what happened?
It's kind of hard to tell with just that information, what they were feeding it, what was in the soil, the pH of the soil, and all that. Many different things. So usually if a plant's drying out or looks like it's all crispy, it's because it's not getting water, and sometimes it's not getting water because the pH is imbalanced, and so the roots can't take in nutrients and they can't take in water very well, And so that's what causes that burning on the outside of the plant. So it
Okay.
could be a pH issue. Most cases, people growing cannabis at home, it's going to be a pH issue. That's usually what I see. People will see like deficiencies arise because of that. And so checking the pH is usually the first place to start.
Okay, that's really good feedback for sure. So most people you find who are growing at home end up having pH issues usually.
Well, I see when people see deficiency problems,
Mm-hmm.
it's usually because of pH.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know
Especially
any
growing in soil.
Okay. Do either of you know anything about products or devices? I have a device that I got from Lee Valley for measuring pH in the soil. Is there anything that you can recommend, Philip, or that you maybe sell at Teragenic Solutions?
There's a lot of pens. Again, the price range varies dramatically from $30 to like $300. But basically from the low end, you can go to a NutriPlus. They have the quick starts. Remember that you need to recalibrate those pens always, about once a week and a half, and keep it with storage solution. But the best brands on the market right now that I found, or at least in Canada and easily accessible to us, is Hanna. Hanna make terrific pens for pH and ppm, so the amount of fertilizer you're using and the pH, and a Blue Lab, sorry. So Hanna and Blue Lab right now, for at least what we can get in Canada, are the two top brands that we found personally and that we use. I love Hanna.
Okay, I'm going to make a note of that, and we'll link that brand below. This question is from Leah. One of my seedlings stretched a lot and fell over. Now the leaves are really curled down. Is there any way to save it?
Absolutely. So sometimes, yeah, the seedlings will grow really tall because they're not getting enough light. When you transplant it, you can transplant it deeper into the soil so that the soil is kind of covering some of the stem, and roots will come off that. So that's one great way that you can bounce back from a
Mine's kind of tall too.
That was not too bad, but when
No.
you transplant it, you might want to bring it a little bit lower.
Yeah, or I could even add a little bit more soil to the top here just to provide a bit more structural support for that stem.
Yeah, because as soon as that starts getting more leaves, it might fall over. But that's good. And it's also like wind is really nice for those seedlings, because if the wind is like blowing the stem, it actually makes the stem a little bit stronger. And so that's why a fan is also really good to have on your seedlings too, because it will actually help develop the stem a little bit.
So do some earthquake tests.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I like that. I always find it so interesting with all plants in how they're so readily available and easy to adapt to their surroundings. Like it's incredible. And that's just so cool. Okay, this is, I think, our last question. I'm going to do another search through to make sure I didn't miss any. This is from Joseph. I have a problem with brown tips on the first few leaves. They don't affect the 7-tip leaves, but they fall off anyway. Does this always happen?
That sounds like either a pH issue or too much fertilizer. It sounds like they're burning their tips a little bit.
Okay.
One thing that a lot of people do when they run into that problem is, especially if they're growing in soil, is they'll flush. So you'll give it a whole bunch of water to flush out those excess nutrients, and then you go back onto the feeding schedule. That can help. A lot of the times, a few little burnt tips aren't a big deal, and the plant will be totally normal.
Okay,
It might not look as cosmetically pleasing to the eye.
It's not completely lost. Okay.
No.
So usually
not really.
pH issues, it sounds like. I mean, for me, when I'm thinking about our house plants inside, if they're turning yellow, or usually yellowing is a sign of either overwatering or underwatering, and usually know whether, oh yeah, well I watered it yesterday, so oh yeah, I'm probably overwatering it. So I guess that's a good way to go in terms of like knowing what those brown tips mean, as a, you know, in comparison to yellowing tips. Brown tipping might be a pH, usually is a pH issue. So that's good to know. And then this is another question that just came in. Is there a good time of day to transplant from indoor to outdoor, like morning, midday, or night? Is there a tendency to be something that is more preferred by the plants?
What I've heard is that doing it first thing in the morning at dawn and at dusk are the two best times to do it. I believe doing it at dawn because you're going to be watering your plants as soon as you transplant them. It's always a good idea to water them right after you transplant them.
Mm-hmm.
So doing it at dawn and watering them allows time for that water to kind of evaporate. I think it's something to do with the processes of the plant in the early daytime. I'm not 100% sure of the science behind it, but it's usually recommended to do your transplants early in the morning or water your plants later at night before the dawn, before
Interesting.
dusk. Yeah.
That was such a good question. I love that question. Now all the questions are kind of rolling in. Someone else has asked, will auto flowers yield the same as normal seeds?
Well, not necessarily. Go ahead, Philip.
Okay. Well, I was going to say about the same thing. It's sorry. From what I've seen, not completely, especially since you can't control how big your plant will get. If you want a big yield and you want a bigger plant, well, you can't do that with autoflower. And I also found that the quality that comes out of an autoflower is not necessarily, but mostly a little less than a feminized or a normal seed. What is your opinion?
Yeah, like I find with autoflowering plants, if you make a mistake with an autoflowering plant, there's very little that you can do to recoup that mistake. Because the plant has a window of 3 months where it's going to grow, and it doesn't matter what the lights are, it's going to go to flower. And if you mess anything up along the way, then it will slow and it will lower your total yield at the end. Going online, there's a lot of people that do these challenges with autoflowering plants, and they try to challenge themselves to see how much volume they can get. But like Phil said, like you can veg your plant for as long as you want. And the longer your plant is in veg, the bigger your plant will be. And so a higher yield is possible. So yeah, I think with photoperiod plants, you can always grow a bigger plant than with autoflowers, if that's what you want.
Amazing. Amazing. That's such good information. We have another question that's come in, and this has actually been a question that's come in a few times. I think especially when there's people that live in the city, you know, your urban dwelling area you don't necessarily have a backyard, you don't maybe have a lot of space. This question is, any tips for growing on an enclosed balcony, concrete base and half walls with screen windows? It's so hard to tell if this is considered outdoor or indoor. So do you both have any perspective on that as to what would be considered, if that would be considered indoor or outdoor? I suppose it would have to do with the light that they're receiving, right?
Yeah. Hopefully they have a balcony that gets a lot of light during the daytime, because that's going to be one of the biggest factors in how well the plant will grow. Because cannabis just loves sunlight.
Fair. Same.
Yeah.
We have that.
It's the same problems as growing outdoors. Like you might have bugs and you might have to worry about pollination and stuff like that. But I've seen people do pretty successful plants on their balconies.
Yeah. Okay. It kind of brought me to wondering what that exact distinction is between growing indoors and outdoors. Of course, I can look outside and I know that that's outside, and I can look inside and I know that this is inside. But is there, a distinction for that growing indoors and outdoors, and what the real difference is? Is it just how much more control you have over the different variables, or what is it specifically?
Well, I would consider a balcony being outdoor, again, because it is a controlled, exactly what you're saying, it's controlled environment. So you can't control your light. So it is the sunlight. You can't control the CO2. You can't really control the bugs or the temperature. So outside in a balcony would usually, for me, be considered growing outside instead of growing inside, where you actually have a light that you can control the time cycle, the CO2 and everything else that comes with it. So usually, yes, if someone grows on their balcony outside, I would consider that outdoor.
Yeah.
And one recommendation that I would do is, if you want more, is to pinch the top, which means taking part of the top. So instead of having a Christmas tree, you have a bigger plant so it doesn't go too high, your neighbors can't see it, or it doesn't hit the top balcony if you have one. Not sure exactly where this balcony is, but at least you'll be able to space it out, the plant out so it makes a bigger buds. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. That's great feedback. I think I'll cut it off there. If anyone else has any more questions, feel free to post it on our Facebook group, not Facebook group, but the Facebook event that is currently running live. You're also welcome to DM us over Instagram. You can email Mike, you can email Philip. We're going to include all of their contact information at the end of the event. Of course, Mike is Reefertilizer.ca, and Philip Robert is Teragenic.com. Those are their two websites. Ours is, of course, the Botanist.ca, where you can learn more about our Grow Good Weeds starter kits. If you're looking to just kind of have a good foundation for getting started, it also includes a whole bunch of great products for the seasoned veteran. So if you do have any questions about that, or about any of the material that we discussed today, please do reach out. We would love to hear from you. We do plan on, at least we've discussed, hosting a workshop similar to this, but kind of later in the growing season, maybe towards the end of August, to kind of highlight and bring forward more specifically tips and tricks on cultivating. So the flowering phase, how to go about trimming and drying, all that stuff. So stay tuned for another live event just like this. It'll be free, of course. So you can tune in and hear again from our experts on how to best go about actually harvesting your crop, which is the exciting part. You know, I mean, it's all exciting from start to finish. I'm excited about this little guy, but you know, of course, the super exciting part is seeing how all of your efforts have gone into your plant and how it has responded to those efforts. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm sure all of you are as well. Thank you so much again, Philip and Mike. You both were amazing. If you have any final remarks, please feel free to say them.
Thanks for having us, Emma. It was a really good time.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And Philip, you guys are open, Teragenic Solutions on the Quebec side?
We're open right now 10 to 4, but we will have longer hours shortly. We kind of restricted them for COVID-19. But as of next week, I believe, or the week after, we're going back from 9:30 till 6. So, but thank you a lot for hosting, and I hope it was fun for everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you both so very much. Again, you can find out more about them directly on our Facebook page or on our Instagram channel. We are at The Urban Botanist, and you'll be able to find tags for both of these gentlemen there as well. Thank you all so much for joining, and enjoy the amazing, amazing summer ahead of us, and staying home and growing good weed. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.